¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?
Welcome back to CHIRLA TV. I'm one of your hosts, Pedro Trujillo, and I'm joined by co-hosts here, Karen.
Hi, Pedro. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you again. And today we have a really special show. That's why we brought cake, trajimos el pastel, because we're celebrating 35 years of CHIRLA this year. We're really happy here to celebrate along all of you. And not only are we celebrating 35 years, but we're celebrating also the people that made these 35 years happen. So that's why we have here today with us Angelica Salas, our Executive Director. Welcome back, Angelica.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and also joined by another special guest, Miguel Cruz, who is a longtime CHIRLA member, hardcore organizer, OG with the organization, and who's going to share a lot of his knowledge as well. Welcome. How are you doing, Miguel?
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me here.
No, it's our privilege to have you here. And let's start off with the early years, Angelica. For folks that don't know much about CHIRLA, it's their first time tuning in, hearing about the organization. When did CHIRLA start? How did it happen?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you to all the people that for the last 35 years have made CHIRLA possible. Because CHIRLA has only gotten to 35 years because of all the people who were part of CHIRLA. So CHIRLA started in 1986, and it was founded to advance the human and the civil rights of immigrants. But it was started after the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act, which was the amnesty bill. And so the organization was began by different organizations. That's why it's called Coalition, because it brought Asian, Mexican, Central American organizations together to help our people actually apply for amnesty. At that time, 2.7 million people were able to legalize their status 35 years ago. And in addition to that, it was also a means by which to educate our community about the program, but also what was introduced in 1986 was employer sanctions. And so all of a sudden, immigrants felt, vulnerable in the workplaces because employers were now asking them for their documentation, the first time that had happened in the history of our country. So that's why CHIRLA began. CHIRLA's first executive director was actually Father Luis Olivares. He was one of the most important people in Los Angeles, and I would say in the country, who actually moved forward the Sanctuary Program. He was the pastor at Our Lady Queen of Angels Church, and Central American refugees made La Placita their home. And so he lifted the voice of Central American refugees who were seeking asylum, but also ensured that the rights of immigrants were advanced. And there were so many people who were part of the formation of CHIRLA. CHIRLA then expanded its work in 1995, which is when I actually came in, around the fight against Proposition 187. People don't believe that California was an anti-immigrant state in which many of the leadership of the anti-immigrant movement in Congress and in Senate were from California. And so 1995, CHIRLA fought against Proposition 187. I started at CHIRLA actually at the hotline, picking up the phones of very nervous immigrants who, after Proposition 187, which was an anti-immigrant proposition passed in California, immigrants were so afraid. So just picking up the phone, listening to unfortunately, so many acts of discrimination that they were facing, and fighting against that situation. But for the last, I would say, 25 years since Proposition 187, CHIRLA has been at the forefront of making California the most pro-immigrant state in the entire nation.
That's beautiful.
Angelica, you share about the political climate. What did it look like before? What was the environment? What does the rhetoric that was being shared around those times? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
What we saw was just an incredible level of hostility against our community. CHIRLA was the first organization in the country to actually begin to organize day laborers at street corners. And so in the early days, what we had was day laborers who were being arrested for looking for work, who were being violently attacked, physically attacked by neighbors and by others, who didn't believe that they should be in this country. So we had a group of day labor worker organizers who would go out to let them know about their worker rights, but also their rights as human beings to be looking for work. Many of my organizers, who were the day labor organizers, would get arrested at the street corners. So many a time I had to go and post bail to get them out of jail because all they were doing was actually providing information to day laborers. So it was a very hostile environment. At the same time that Proposition 187 passed here in California at the national level, they were taking rights from our community for access to benefits. This was access to health care, they wanted to take access away from education, health care for pregnant women. And so it was a big fight back against that. And unfortunately, in 1996, a very harsh immigration law passed, national immigration law passed. And so that is what we're fighting against to this day at a national level, which is just a law that passed that created more penalties for our community. So that's what the environment was at that moment.
And that environment of struggle, of actual discrimination that a lot of brown people are going through, a lot of immigrants are going through, sounds very similar and resonates to the Asian community as today, right, in terms of the hatred that the community is seeing. And here at CHIRLA TV, we're standing in solidarity with the Asian immigrant community as well, as we've been through similar things, us being Latino immigrants as well. And just now that we're talking about the environment that coming into this movement, we're gonna hear more about that, so stay tuned. We gotta go into a short break.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?
Welcome back to CHIRLA TV. Before we went on break, we were discussing about Miguel's lived experiences, which I'm sure many of our viewers can relate, having to find out this reality that they're undocumented. But tell us more about when you started working with CHIRLA, your experience, and talk to us about it.
Yeah, I started working in CHIRLA in 2001. I was a volunteer. I volunteered in the Wise Up collaborative, which is like a group of youth that were just fighting for themselves, fighting to get an identity, but also fighting to change an incredibly a huge system that kept them back, right? And thankfully, because of the platform that CHIRLA provided us, and through the leadership of Angelica and those who were there guiding us, holding our hands, if you will, pushing us through, we were able to achieve big things. So we pushed this policy, right, the AB 540. We were able to organize marches, we organized petitions, we organized visits to our elected officials, visits to the Capitol. And within a few years, CHIRLA had initiated that struggle, but we came in at the right moment, at the precise moment, and we gave voice to those students who were being directly affected by this issue. And through that voice, we were able to get the AB 540 signed in 2001. And that was incredibly important to me in my life because it showed me that few individuals can make huge changes, right? You don't need like a mass movement. The mass movement will back you up eventually, but you really need to be tenacious and look out and get these achievements. And that changed my life forever. I thought that following the footsteps of the leaders who had started that struggle for the AB 540, I wanted to in turn pay it forward and continue that struggle. And we started talking about the DREAM Act, and then it was called the Student Adjustment Act, and then it quickly transitioned into the DREAM Act. we started having conversations. We started to dream, like literally dream. We started to dream about a national movement, a national organization, a national network. We started dreaming about connecting all of the clubs in California, all of immigrant communities in California and the state. We started dreaming big. And at that time, it seemed almost impossible. But little by little, we did it.
And what year did you join?
I joined in 2001.
2001.
Yeah.
And for the viewers that don't know the importance of passing a policy, a state policy like AB 540, which granted in-state tuition to undocumented youth, California was only the second state to get this level of policy, this type of policy. And even to this day, right now in 2021, only about half of the states in the country have a similar policy. There's still ways to go in many other states that are not there for their undocumented immigrant youth. So, again, huge props to the folks from Wise Up back in the day, the OG, that's why I said OGs, the OG Wise Up folks, for holding it down and being really the ones who were breaking ground in immigrant youth organizing. And speaking about breaking ground, Angelica, so we're talking about the early 2000s here. CHIRLA starts shifting from not only working with day laborers, but students as well. You were speaking to me off camera about the domestic worker fight as well. Can you talk about that?
So CHIRLA was also organizing domestic workers. In 1991, we started organizing domestic workers. These are the women who are taking care of other people's homes, cleaning them, but also taking care of children, taking care of pets, taking care of the elderly. And we noticed that there was just no rights for these women. So we began to organize domestic workers under this campaign that was called Super Doméstica. And it was really about getting information to people at the bus stops, at the parks, and making sure that they became engaged. I want to say that CHIRLA made a very deliberate and intentional decision that we needed to organize our community, that we were not going to win if their voice, their lived experience, their vision, their dreams were not front and center in our fight. So in the early 90s, we shifted to not only include services and community education, but to make organizing of our people fundamental to the organizations.
That's right, and really that's the power of CHIRLA, right? That CHIRLA saw the need, saw where the community was at, and engaged the community and fought with the community to ensure that the rights were respected and new rights were gained as well. And so stay tuned, we still have a lot to cover, and thank you for joining us for this special 35-year anniversary of CHIRLA.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?
Welcome back to CHIRLA TV. We're here, we're joined by Angelica Salas, Executive Director at CHIRLA, who is just talking to us about the early on experiences of the early 2000s with CHIRLA. Talk to us about, because right now the organization is much larger, it has so many different aspects of it, legal services, organizing, community education. How was it different then?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, we were beginning to do a lot of our organizing, building the power of our people. So we focused a lot on community education, getting our community to understand the rights and what I say, the resources that are available, but also the responsibilities to take action on their own behalf. And so in the early 2000s, as we were building up our youth movement, because we said there's no way no movement moves forward without the power of youth. There is no way to move forward. And so that was, we put a lot of attention to that. We also actually, in the 2000s, we had a significant win. We actually sued the LA County, saying that day laborers did have the right to look for work, and we won. And it was precedent setting lawsuit that provided day laborers all over the country the right to look for work. Moving forward, the day laborers, domestic workers at CHIRLA joined forces with other worker centers that were also emerging, some which we were founding, like the Garment Worker Center. And together, these workers formed the Multi-Ethnic Immigrant Worker Organizing Network. And so our organizers at CHIRLA brought all of these workers together. And with them, this was at the beginning of 2000, was our first big push for immigration reform and legalization. And what I'm so proud of is that it came from the voice of the workers, from them saying, no, this is what we want. We want to be able to live in this country with full legal status, and we deserve rights in the workplace, And so we're going to fight for that. So in 2000, we began our first May 1st March. And so we've been marching for 21 years at CHIRLA. And I would say every year that has moved forward, many of the original members and folks who have been organized through CHIRLA have now become staff members at CHIRLA and leadership and are leading the organization.
And just so the audience knows, we have some posters from our May Day March here in Los Angeles in the back that I joined, and I borrowed those posters to come over here to beautify our space. But you touched on something really important here, Angelica, which was that of youth who are volunteers then turning into staff, which is something that Miguel experienced. Talk to us about that.
It was incredible for me. It's something where I went into the youth component of CHIRLA Wise Up thinking that my life is over. What am I going to do? And have you heard the saying that dice, the necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so you form part of the organization, you struggle, and then you win such a big victory like the AB 540, and the world changes to me. And suddenly I realized that there's this whole career path ahead of me in ensuring social justice. And I couldn't be happier. I mean, what kind of a dream job is that? I quickly realized that I was in this path of really enriching my life, enriching who I was as a person, and at the same time beautifying my community and fighting for my community. Every day that I went to work, I literally saw my siblings, I saw my parents, and it felt like if I was working for them. It felt like I was home. I was always home. And that to me was incredibly valuable. I can't give enough thanks to Angelica and to CHIRLA and to everybody else, Horacio, to you. I just can't give enough thanks because it's transformed my entire career. Now I have 20 years of working in this field of ensuring social change through community-based organizing, political-based organizing. I'm a private consultant now, but in my career path, I've also dedicated a lot of my years fighting in the trenches with one of the largest civil rights organizations in the country, and I couldn't be happier. It's just amazing to me.
Congratulations. So let's go into the transformation into the civic engagement role. I know we're going to tap a little bit more with Horacio, but I wanted to get your take on it.
Sure.
So, Angelica, if you can talk to us about the political fight into the civic engagement world, which means elections. How did CHIRLA first decide to get involved with that?
What had happened is that the immigrant workers that were part of our base were organizing. Their demand at the national level was legalization and immigration reform. At the state level, they wanted to fight and win driver's license. And so we had major campaigns going to Sacramento, and we won the driver's license, and we got it signed. But in the middle of all this all happened in the middle of a recall election of the Democratic governor, then Gray Davis. And so then the person who came forward, Governor Schwarzenegger, was against the driver's license and actually used it as part of their campaign. So what we realized is that not only do we have to do the organizing, but we also have to enter into the political space to advance what we want, but to defend the things that we have won. And so that's in 2004. We began our first civic engagement program at CHIRLA, which was getting out the vote and getting out people to ensure that they cast their the vote at election day.
And that's something that's also many other organizations, I want to say, started following that example as well, no?
Yeah, well, definitely. But I'm very proud of the fact that we were a pioneer in that, even within the immigrant rights community, of actually matching organizing, community education with electoral organizing. And so for us, it means that we have to build power. What is power? Power is the ability to ensure that what you want to get done gets done, and to defend your community. And so civic engagement, electoral organizing, political organizing has been part of that, to the point that in 2009 we also formed the CHIRLA Action Fund.
And that's the beauty of strategy here, and that's why we love having Angelica here, because she's telling us the insides of what was going on, and we only see the end product, right? Which is now we have a California that's immigrant friendly, and that's something that had to be fought for and organized for. So thank you. Stay tuned. We're gonna go into a short break, and we'll be back.
¿Quiénes somos?
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue the conversation of 35-year anniversary of CHIRLA. I want to know more about how CHIRLA TV started, what you want to continue to work on. Please share with us a little bit more.
Sure. Well, CHIRLA, one of CHIRLA's program is community education and outreach. And so that is the spirit of coming to our community with information that they need, with information about their rights, resources, and also how they can get engaged. So CHIRLA TV is born of partnership because a lot of our community education work is actually in partnership with others. So we want to say thank you to LA TV because LA TV took a chance on CHIRLA, and we came together to create one more platform in order for our community to get this information. And so it's been incredibly successful because we not only get to share this information in California, but this show goes all across the country. And so we have had calls because of CHIRLA TV to our CHIRLA hotline, which is another component of our community education and outreach. Actually, the hotline was the first job I had at CHIRLA some many years ago, 26 years ago. And so for me, it's really important to ensure that we have avenues and on-ramps for our community to connect with us. And so it's wonderful to get a call from, Utah or Colorado from folks who said, hey, we watched this CHIRLA TV episode, and maybe you talked about DACA, or you talked about, some of the legal services, some of the information, or there was an update. And so that's what we want to hear. And for us, it's important to get to our community. It's not that yes, of course, we want to be accessible to our community so that they can come to us, but we also have a responsibility to find them where they're at.
And the beauty of CHIRLA TV is that the show started during a time when the immigrant community felt like there was a sense of uncertainty and threat because it was under an unfriendly administration. It was under the Trump administration that this program began, where we started giving so much about information like know your rights and what happens if you're in a detention center. We brought attorneys here from CHIRLA. So I think that was crucial timing, and I believe that we helped so many folks out as well. I'd like to thank our guest here again, Angelica Salas, Executive Director of CHIRLA, and Miguel Cruz, longtime supporter, CHIRLA member, and organizer at some point with CHIRLA. And so thank you both for being here. Really a pleasure chatting with you all. This is one segment of two. It's because we have so much more content to go over the last 35 years of CHIRLA. Thank you all.
¿Quiénes somos? ¿Quiénes somos?